Okay.
So we've seen that as I'm running this marathon here in this sweltering room here, sweating up a storm, doing it's almost equivalent of aerobics, and I could use some aerobics here. 6 weeks ago I blew out my knee jogging, and I haven't been able to do any exercise since. So I've put on about 8 pounds in the last 6 weeks. All of it right here. Can't stand it. So I'm glad I'm sweating. I'm losing weight. I'm doing Christian aerobics here. This is good. Marathon. Let's just plow through this thing. So here we go. Everything hangs upon our thinking, getting our thoughts lined up with truth. But here's the thing. Most people don't realize how they think. How do you think? How do you think? Let me ask you this question. What's the color of the drapes in your room? Are you probably going to tell me beige or pink or blue or whatever. Suppose you say that they're blue. And I ask you, well, how do you know that? And you'll say, well, because I remember it. But how do you remember it? How do you remember it? Did your brain just give you a bunch of information? The colors of your drapes are blue. No. How did you access that information? And the answer, if you do some introspection, is that you remembered that the color of the drapes was blue because you re-experienced those curtains in some way. You re-experienced it. You represented that in your brain. Your brain, to find that information, goes back to probably the last time you saw your curtains. And they turn out to be blue. Now, you can only give me information because you can't give me what you actually saw to get that information. And this is why we tend to think that we think with information, but we don't. We think by representing reality on the inside. Think about anything you wish. What'd you have for breakfast this morning? What's in the back seat of your car? What does your boyfriend or girlfriend look like? Or, tell me about the color of your spouse's eyes. Or any question like that, you re-experience it. To represent means you make present again. Present. Represent. So you make present again something in your past experience. And that's how we think. Another word for this is imagination. Our brain's capacity to have images, to make images. Imagination is the foundation of all of our kind of thinking. The other thing is that the more vivid your imagination is, the more there's an emotional component to it. If the memory is emotionally, it has emotion surrounding it. The more lifelike, the more real-like you think, the more power it has. So if I want to tell you about my wife right now, if I were to just give you some information, or just think about information, she's 5'4" and she's got brunette hair and she's weighs none of your business, and if I just give you information like that, it wouldn't move me or you. It's just flat information. Even if I said she's stunningly gorgeous and she's so kind and compassionate, it's information. And information doesn't ever really impact us unless it evokes image in us, a reality in us, something concrete. But if I right now were to take a moment and I think about my wife, I get a vivid picture of her. I make it lifelike. It's in color. There's motion. I see her playing with our cute little puppies, cutest puppy in the world, little Gracie. And it's so cute to watch her interact with this little puppy. And I see her getting down and tickling the dog. And see, now that can evoke a kind of feeling in me, like a longing in me. It's like, oh, I feel like what I'd feel if I was actually there watching her do this. The more vivid the imagination, the more impact it has on us. This is why memories can be so powerful. If something traumatic happens in your life, let's say that you're molested by an uncle or a babysitter or whoever. Well, see, your brain, let's say that happens when you're 6 years old, your 6-year-old brain locks that in and remembers it, because your brain's job is to try to protect you. And so from then on, every time there's anything that's remotely similar to that abusive event, maybe a guy has the same kind of hair color or the same voice inflection, or it could be anything, the brain will automatically represent that abuse. And saying, warning, 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 and move away, you're in danger. And it's doing it from a 6-year-old's perspective, because that's when it got locked in. And it's vivid, it's in color, and it's in motion, because it wants to impact you to move away from that. Now, here's the thing. Our brains operate at 1/3000th of a second. but we're only conscious of 7 to 9 pieces of information per second. You can only, even to be the most attentive you can be, you can only hold 9 pieces of information in your attention at any given moment. So like right now, if I were to ask you to feel the weight of your body on the chair, your butt pressing up against the chair, whatever you're sitting on. Okay, now your brain attended to that, but to do that, you had to let go of some other piece of information. Maybe up until this point, you had noticed the odor of the person that sat next to you, but now you forgot it because your brain's attending to this. So we only hold this a small bit of information in our consciousness. And our brain offers us those 7 to 9 pieces of information in our consciousness based on what's relevant in the situation. Here's what you need to know. Our consciousness is on a need-to-know basis. Our brain's got a lot more going on, but it says pay attention to these 7 things. That's what's important. So when I said feel the weight of the chair, your butt on the chair, well, then your brain says, I guess that's important, so that your mind turned to that, but had to let go of something else. It no longer was relevant that the person next to you didn't shower for the last week, or whatever it is, the sound of something or what. So that's why this person who had this abuse that went on, they aren't aware of what they're seeing in their head. All they're aware of is the impact it has. And so they're gripped with fear. Like a guy with the same kind of hair color or somebody with the same kind of voice inflection, or could be anything. All of a sudden they have this panic, this fear. This is how all phobias are anchored. They're anchored in images and representations that we're not aware of, but that cause an emotional response in us. And the emotional response, when this young lady sees a person with that kind of hair or a guy with that kind of voice inflection, her brain says warning, shows her the image, but she's not aware of that. But she'll feel this impact, and she'll feel it as though she was 6 years old again. This is how all phobias work. There's a young lady that I and a friend were dealing with at some time. We wrote a book on this, by the way. Al Larson and I. It's called Escaping the Matrix. And if you wrestle with anything that I'm talking about in this session, I recommend you getting that book and exploring this. But this young lady had this phobia of bugs. She was successful and intelligent, and she knew the information that bugs are on the whole safe and you don't have to live your life in fear of them and things like that. But she just had a phobia about all bugs. She would never walk on grass because there's bugs on the grass. It determined where she went on vacation. She couldn't go anywhere that was too buggy. It really crimped her life quite a bit. But she had no idea why she had this. Now, in dealing with her, the job of therapists, I'm not a therapist, but I was working with one, and I brought the theology to it. But the job is to try to access the anchor, to access the representation that's causing this emotion. And so you work with a person to try to just follow the pain trail, follow the fear trail back to where its source is. And often it's hidden way deep inside there. It takes some work to get to it. And you got to slow down the brain, go frame by frame. What are you seeing? What are you hearing? What's going on? But we were finally able to do this, and it turns out the whole thing went back to when she was 8 or 9 years old. She fell asleep on a cot in her backyard on a hot summer day. Her little 6-year-old brother is out collecting bugs and gets all these creepy crawlers, all sorts of insects, whatever, and he's going to collect them for his own purposes, whatever, but he sees his sister sleeping there, and he gets a really funny idea. What would happen if he poured them all on her? That'd be hilarious, wouldn't it? So she pours them all on her head, and she wakes up to these bugs crawling up her nose and in her ears. And as an 8 or 9-year-old girl, she goes into a panic and thinks she's going to be eaten alive by these bugs. Her little brain locks it in. Bugs can eat you alive. And so now the thought of a bug, seeing a bug, coming kind of with any kind of bug, causes her to represent, her brain thinks it's doing her a favor, to represent this thing in a vivid way. So she's once again a terrorized 8-year-old girl who thinks she's being devoured by bugs. The good news is that you can change that. We've got the power to change that. In fact, once you know what's anchoring it, changing it's not very hard at all. God's given us authority over our representations. Think about a pink elephant. Now turn it purple. Look, you just did that. It's incredible. Think about a yellow banana. Now turn it green. Now put polka dots on it. It can be any color you want. Look, we have authority to change this stuff, and you can change the neurological wiring of your brain. And you can bring every thought captive to Christ. Invite Jesus in on that. Can't go into all that right now. You can find out more about that in the book. But memories are powerful because they're vivid. They're lifelike. If you remember something in a vague way, it doesn't impact you much. But if you remember it in a powerful way, it can, for better or for worse, can improve or hinder your life. This is why advertisements are so brilliantly vivid. Some of the best minds in neuroscience work for advertising agents, and their whole job is to help advertisers come up with advertisements that are most effective at getting anchored in our brains. And so they're vivid. They give very little information. Now, if you look back in the 50s, look at some of those commercials, they didn't know as much about neuroscience as we do today. In fact, they knew hardly anything. So they give a lot of information. And they're boring as all heck. It's like, oh my God. But advertisements now are just full of vivid images, and it's all geared towards the target audience. Honestly, half the time, after I watch an advertisement, I don't know what the advertisement was for, because I'm not the target audience. I don't get it. It's like, what was that about? But I'm real confident that the smart people who are behind these advertisements knew what they're doing, and the ones who are supposed to get the commercial get the commercial. And they're vivid, they're graphic. Like, for example, a classic example is beer commercials are known for their edgy sexiness. And often there's a lot of Freudian imagery in beer commercials. Beer commercials are geared, and the main beer drinkers, I'm told, are men from the age of 18 to 35. That's their kind of target group. And they know that men from the ages of 18 to 35 are thinking about sex a lot. They've got their hormones raging, especially when they're 18. And so that's what their minds are thinking a lot about anyways. And so what they want to do is somehow associate their beer with those hormonal thoughts. Now, it's a challenge because there's nothing particularly sexy about beer. I've never met a lady who loves the smell of beer breath or really enjoys a beer belly. And beers are not aphrodisiacs, they're the opposite. So this is a hard sell. But that's all information, doesn't matter. If you can get the brain to draw neural nets where they overlap and connect with each other, well then the hope is that whenever these guys are thirsty, they'll think about their beer, and whenever they think about sex, they'll think about their beer, and it will have a positive association. And it works because it's graphic, it's vivid, and so you have these scenes that for young men their minds are likely to latch in on. Sexy lady who's not fully clothed, that kind of thing. So the more vivid it is, the better. And so we think in images. Actually, this is the essence of faith. In Hebrews 11, verse 1, it says this. This is Darby's translation. Faith is the substantiating of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. Now, this is a passage that's telling us how to do faith. It is the substantiating of things hoped for. The word there is, the word is hypostasis. And that is the word for essence, or to make something concrete, solid. So faith is making something solid, concrete, that you hope for. And then he says it's a conviction of things not seen. The word there is elegkos. And what the author's getting at here is this. So when you see something that you anticipate to be true, and you see it in a concrete, vivid way, it creates this conviction, this elegkos, that it will be so. And see, that moves you in a direction. As you see it, it's a vision of the future that you anticipate or hope for. And the more vivid you see that, it creates this sense of it will be so, which motivates you to move in that direction. And that's where all of the heroes of faith in Hebrews 11, they're heroes not because they actually got what they were moving towards. Faith isn't a guarantee about certain outcomes, but because they moved in that direction. They were all journeyers. They were on a journey, looking for a city that's not of this world and things like that, it says. So Jesus says that according to your faith be it unto you. And in saying that, he's not just giving a religious principle there. He's giving a life principle. What we do is an outworking of what we see in our heads. What do you anticipate? And this isn't magic. It's not like, that stupid book, The Secret, which says that you can get anything you want if you just believe it enough. That's nonsense. But it is a life principle here. That lady was having faith that bugs would devour her. That's what she saw, and so it created a conviction that it would be so, and that set her life in a certain direction. Everything you do requires some kind of faith. If you get on a plane to go someplace, you don't know for sure that there's not a terrorist on board, or that the mechanics were drunk when they inspected the thing, or whatever. It could crash. They crash once in a while. It's not likely, but they do crash. But you have faith that's going to happen. When you think about flying, you don't see it crashing, you see it flying. But I have met people who have a fear of flying, and what they see, what they have faith for, what they feel, is that it will crash, and so that moves their life in a different direction. According to your faith be it unto you. So here's the thing. You can have, I've experienced this, a couple who have a problematic marriage, and they really want it to work. They go to counseling, and they work through their issues, and they, all that. But see, here, the question that a good therapist would ask is, what faith are you having for this marriage? Because here's the thing. Couples who are in good marriages, when they're not together, they run representations of their marriage, the positive experiences, very brightly, very vividly, and very frequently. They ruminate on the positive. And so when they come back together, guess what? They have an elegkos. They've been substantiating the positives of the marriage, which gives them the conviction, the elegkos, that it will be so. So they bring this positive energy back, which greatly increases that it will be so. Yeah, they got things to work out. But the negative things in their marriage, if overall it's positive, the negative experiences, they get downplayed in their brain. If they think about them at all, there's research on this. If they think about them at all, they think about it in terms of it's in black and white. It's not lifelike. It's small. It often doesn't have motion. It just doesn't have impact on them. It doesn't create an elegkos, because that's not what they anticipate their marriage overall being like. Now, other couples, they may sincerely want to make this thing work, but if they haven't been taught otherwise, what they can be doing, I've seen it, is they have faith that their marriage is going to be always going to be miserable, or that's going to fail altogether. They ruminate on the negative. I can't believe he said that. What a jerk. I might have married this guy. He looks ugly. I can't believe that. And then he said this. And they just ruminate on it. And they're representing stuff that happened, the negative stuff that happened. And it's in color, and it's full, and all of that. And so guess what? When they come back together, they come with this elegkos, this conviction that's going to be miserable, which greatly increases the chances of it being miserable. They're on edge. They're looking for it. They expect it. They're having faith for it. They may sincerely want the thing to work, but as long as you're having faith that it's not going to work, all this work in the world is not likely to do much. Until you change the faith, you're not going to change the reality. According to your faith, be it unto you. This is how we think. Now, I share all that to say this. When it comes to being transformed by the renewing of our mind, what most people are given is information. The truth. Think about the truth of who you are in Christ. Know who you are in Christ. So tell yourself, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And I'm filled with the Spirit. I'm a walking, talking temple of God. And He hasn't given me a spirit of fear, but a power, love, and self-control. And the fruit of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, meekness, and self-control. And I'm seated with Christ in heavenly places, far above all principalities and powers. And so on, and so on, and so on. All wonderful, wonderful, wonderful information. And if a person we think in what's called different modalities. We file information according to one of three modes. Either visual, when you remember things, it's primarily what you see that matters, or auditory, it's what you hear that matters, or some are kinesthetic, it's what you sense that matters. And all three are valid. We just have one that's dominant. And so for auditory people, telling yourself the truth maybe will do the trick. Because that's how you're wired. But for a visual like me, telling myself the truth doesn't do much. I got to see it. That's when it will be impactful. And in general, the more lifelike our thoughts can be, the more vivid they can be, the more it's going to impact our life. So here's what I encourage you to do. This is a discipline of prayer. Regularly set aside times where you don't just know the truth. Now, you need to know that. Like, have a sheet of paper where you write down your true identity in Christ, or something along those lines, and have the verses there. That's good. But I encourage you, don't just hear the passage or say the passage. Ask the Spirit to help you see the truth of who you are in Christ. And have it as lifelike, as real, as vivid as possible. And it's especially good to do this with scenes, memories, experiences you've had where you're least like that. All right? So there's a person that I have recently been talking with, and they work with a person who drives them crazy. This person can send them into a cursing spell like that. And she can't love this person, she says. She just despises this person, disdains this person. This person's petty and jealous and mean-spirited and vindictive and happens to be her boss, so she has the power to make her really, really miserable, and she does it very effectively all the time. But she's getting paid well, and she can't afford to get out of this job, so her life is a living hell. And so I encouraged her to do this exercise regularly and a lot. Have time where you ask the Spirit to help you. See, what do you really look like when you put on display the truth that you've got a peace that passes understanding, that you've got the fruit of the Spirit, including patience, that you have the Spirit of Christ in you, so you're able to love your enemies and bless your... What does it look like when go to the scene where you most recently blew up and lost it and completely destroyed your Christian witness, as she said. And now see yourself responding to that differently. And run that over and over again. And as you do that, you tell yourself, that's who I truly am, because in fact, according to the Word, that's who you truly are. You're acting out of this old false self as though Jesus never died for you, as though you haven't been transformed. You're still under the deception of that. And who knows why that's happened. That's another story. But right now, can you see yourself as you truly are in Christ? Because until you can see it and hear it and sense it, going with all five senses, it's never going to change. Here's what's really funky. We know that you never get good at anything unless you practice it, right? If you want to be a baseball star, you're not going to make it on the Twins and hit a homer in the bottom of the ninth with 2 outs and you're down by 1 run and the bases are loaded. You're not going to do that unless you are practicing a lot, both in your mind and in reality, practicing to hit a ball coming at you at 102 miles an hour. Well, we all know that's true, and yet we think that the Christian life's just going to happen. It's a default. It's just what's going to, or we wait for it to happen. No, like anything else, if we're going to live distinct lives that look different from other people and that put on display the truth of who we are in Christ, we've got to practice for it. We've got to rehearse for it. And it starts in your bedroom. Run these scenarios out. And affirming that that's who you truly are. And then, as you come upon that situation that tends to trigger you and make you unchristian and lose your salvation and all that, as you're coming upon that, run those tapes, reminding yourself of the truth of who you are in Christ, and see yourself vividly. You're wired to think with vivid pictures to represent reality on the inside. And so if we're going to bring every thought captive to Christ, we have to do it with images. That's why Paul says, the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but they're spiritual, to the tearing down of strongholds. Strongholds is any habit of thought in there that is contrary to Christ. And we come against every reasoning process, he says, and every pretentious thing. The pretentious thing simply means it's something that stands out. Something that stands out. And he's talking about how we think. And so what stands out in terms of how we think is our imagination. And a few translations translate it that way, but most get it wrong. But come against every thought, reasoning process, and imagination, every picture that's not consistent with Christ, and bring it captive to Christ. See yourself, experience yourself as you really are in Christ, and be transformed on that basis. Now, when we come back next time, I'm going to talk about the impact this can have in terms of our getting life from Christ. See you in a little bit. Woo-wee! It's hot in here.